the front door of the Greeley Police Department is a new missing person poster. But the case of 12-year-old Jonelle Matthews is decades older than even this building.
The possibility that something will come forward, we have to just keep trying.
Janelle was a 7th grader in 1984, just finished a Christmas choir performance. Police said a friend and the friend's father dropped Janelle off at her house. About an hour later, her family came home, but Janelle was gone. Her shoes left behind, the front door open, the television still on.
It has.
Sergeant Joseph Timkowicz was a young officer back then.
There was all hands on deck call, and just about anybody and everybody who would respond to a phone call or could respond to a phone call was called in throughout the night and the rest of the day.
Days became years, and a decade later, Janelle's family told reporters they believe she'd been kidnapped and killed. The community said their official goodbye.
You had 12 years of light.
This is one of those cases that never closes. It'll be there until we do resolve it.
34 years later, Greeley police released video from that night, hoping to jog some memories.
Put it out there in the public and let them think about, hey, yeah, I remember that night, or I remember seeing this car, or I remember seeing that person walking.
Police believe someone who knows what happened might have lived in the community or nearby at the time, maybe still does. Greeley police will not give specifics, but said advances in forensic technology and scientific testing could lead to new answers.
We could get a piece of evidence tonight, tomorrow, the next day that will resolve the entire case. And that's why we have to keep looking, keep searching.
On July 24, 2019, the remains of Jonelle Matthews were found. Jonelle disappeared 34 years ago without a trace. In the 1980s, Americans were led to believe that as many as 1 million children a year were missing and presumed to be the subjects of stranger abductions. There wasn't an Amber Alert system, and the Center for Missing and Abducted Children was in its infancy. Most police departments throughout the country had a 72-hour waiting period before they would begin to work on a missing child's case, which made finding a missing child almost impossible, such as in the case of Jonelle Matthews. Jonelle Matthews was a 12-year-old girl who disappeared on December 20th, 1984. Jonelle Matthews lived on the 300 block of 43rd Avenue Court in Greeley, Colorado, with her adopted parents, Jim and Gloria Matthews, and her older sister, Jennifer. Her father was the principal of Platte Valley Elementary School in Kersey, Colorado. Janelle was a member of the Franklin Middle School Choir, which performed at Intra-West Bank of Denver in the evening of December 20th, 1984. Janelle's father was at his other daughter's basketball game. Janelle's mother had flown east to be with Janelle's grandfather, who was ill. At 8:15 p.m., Janelle arrived at her home in Greeley, Colorado, after getting a ride from her friend Deanne Ross and Deanne's father. Shortly after 8:30 p.m., Janelle answered a phone call and took a message for her father. That phone call was the last time anyone heard from Janelle. When her father arrived home several minutes after Janelle, she was not there. Her father arrived home at 9:30 p.m. and found the garage door open, but no one was home. Although Janelle's shoes and a shawl was near a heater in the family room where Janelle often sat, Janelle's sister got home at 10 p.m. but had not seen her. Their father began to worry and called police. The police arrived at 10:15 p.m. They found footprints in the snow, indicating that someone had been looking in the windows. There was no sign of a struggle or a forced entry. With snow on the ground, her father thought it was unlikely that she would go far without shoes. Her parents, Jim and Gloria, appeared on national television pleading for help, and thousands of reward posters of the girl were produced and distributed. Her parents, Jim and Gloria, appeared on national television pleading for help, and thousands of reward posters of the girl were produced and distributed. For several weeks after the disappearance, the police placed Janelle's birth mother, Terry Vieira Martinez under surveillance without ever telling her that her daughter had gone missing. And I couldn't believe when I read that. That is just so wrong and so dirty on so many levels. I don't care if Terry was a suspect or whatever. You had the right. She had the right to know that her child was missing. That she didn't have custody anymore. She was the birth mother. The police department, well, the Greeley Police Department could at least give her the decency as a human being to let her know that her child is missing. I don't even understand how they could look in her face and, question her without telling her that. Moving on. Over the years, investigators have pursued hundreds of leads in a cold case that is familiar to longtime residents of the northern Colorado city. 10 years later, and after Janelle was declared legally dead, Gloria, Janelle's adopted mother, received a letter from her birth mother requesting permission to visit her child she gave up for adoption, something Janelle always wanted. The birth mother, Terry, had used a search consultant to help locate Janelle. The adoptive parents notified Terry about what happened and the families became friends. That is so sad. She was looking to see her child and the police could have at least gave her a peace. Well, it wouldn't have been a peace of mind, but at least let her know what happened. Years. Again, I'm sorry, I just keep going on about it, but that just really bothered me. The disappearance attracted public interest, including the president, and the president at the time was Ronald Reagan, and members of Congress. In 2010, the Greeley Tribune published another story of Janelle's disappearance. There is a choke tree that was planted nearly 30 years ago in front of Janelle's school, Franklin Middle School. The tree is now gone, along with a plaque inscribed in her name. In May 2013, an age-progressed image of Janelle was released in hope of developing fresh leads in her case. And in December, Greeley police announced that investigators were taking a renewed, fresh look at the missing person case. As recently as 2018, Greeley police have been recontacting witnesses and applying the latest forensic advances to learn what happened to Janelle. She remained missing for 34 years until she was discovered on July 24th by workers constructing a new pipeline. Excavators installing the pipeline discovered human remains on Tuesday, July 23rd of this year. And about 6 miles away from, it's about 15 miles southeast of Janelle's home. Based on DNA evidence, the Weld County Coroner's Office positively identified the remains as Jonelle Matthews. As of July 29th of this year, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation has not released any information about how Janelle might have died, but have stated that the case is being treated as a homicide. Authorities are searching historical records to determine who owned or lived on the land where the remains were found. And so far, if they found that information out, they haven't released it. On September 13th of 2019, Greeley Police Department announced a person of interest in Jonelle Matthews' abduction and murder. The person of interest is named Steve Pankey, who ran for governor in Idaho in 2014 and 2018, and for lieutenant governor in 2010. His home in Colorado was searched under a warrant that stated investigators had probable cause to believe that Pankey abducted and murdered Janelle that night. Pankey and his former wife lived only 2 miles away from Janelle's home, where she was last seen.
Janelle's remains were finally found. And then in September, Steve Pankey was named a person of interest in the girl's death. CBS 4's Kelly Worthman has been following all the new developments in this case. And Kelly, you've talked with Pankey.
You know, Mr. Pankey actually reached out to me following our coverage of the discovery of Janelle's remains earlier this year. Now, he now lives in Idaho and even ran for governor there unsuccessfully a couple of times. He admitted that since leaving Colorado, he would often search the internet for any information about Janelle's cold case, but he says he definitely had no part in her death.
It just bothered me over the years that it hadn't been resolved.
Steve Pankey lived in the same neighborhood as Jonelle Matthews in 1984, but says he never met the 12-year-old girl or her family.
I didn't know Jonelle Matthews existed or disappeared until 6 days after the fact.
Soon after Janelle's remains were found this summer, Pankey says Greeley detectives showed up to his Idaho home accusing him of the girl's disappearance.
The Greeley police were eager beavers to charge me with something.
But Pankey claims that isn't possible and willingly went to Idaho authorities to prove his innocence.
I assumed if I gave my DNA, that would be kind of like a knockout blow.
Months later, investigators haven't shared if any DNA was found on the clothing unearthed with Janelle's remains or why Pankey is being called a person of interest.
Did you kill Jonelle Matthews?
Absolutely not.
Pankey is frustrated he's part of the ongoing investigation, but that's not stopping him from hoping the girl's killer is found.
I would hope that the terrible tragedy of 12-year-old Jonelle Matthews is eventually solved.
Now, we have asked Greeley police for any updates in this case, especially after they seized Pankey's computers, his emails, even some diaries earlier this year, but we are told there are no updates that the police can share at this point in the investigation.
Easy, compared to the journey they've been on for 34 years.
Of course, it was a real shock. When we first heard it.
Gloria and Jim Matthews got the call last week. A detective in Greeley had some long-awaited news.
We both were just really surprised and shocked.
Totally caught off guard. Yeah, it was just we have been consigned to the fact that we probably never would know what happened to her, and this is just an absolute miracle about how she was found.
Janelle's case stumped investigators and captivated the country.
But 5 days before Christmas, Jonelle disappeared from her home.
It was an excavation crew that would find her remains at an oil and gas site in Weld County 34 years later.
So we really believe that God has provided a miracle for this to happen.
While Greeley police work to figure out who is responsible for Janelle's death, her parents say they just wanted to find her.
We're at peace with the fact that she is that she's with the Lord, and
Amen.
And that is our greatest comfort.
As you can see in the clip, Pankey is totally denying that he had anything to do with Janelle's disappearance and murder. He claims that basically he is being targeted, that there's no way that he would have anything to do with the murder. He said that he did not know who she was until after her disappearance and it was being broadcasted on television stations and so forth. So when Pankey did live in Greeley, Colorado in the early 1980s, he had briefly worked as a youth pastor at the Sunnyview Church of the Nazarene. That's the same church that Janelle's family attends. But Pankey said he left the church before Janelle's family became members. A few weeks after Janelle's remains were discovered, Pankey said a pair of Greeley Police Department detectives showed up to his home accusing him of the disappearance. So they had to have some reason to do so, although they're not saying. So the Greeley police were eager, he says, to charge me with something. And he said he had a bad relationship with the police because at that time he was charged with 20 misdemeanors. And I guess, I don't know, he didn't say if it was pertaining to this case, I'm assuming it is, and that they all failed. So investigators are still, like I said, not sharing any information from the clothing or anything that was unearthed with Janelle's remains. detectives also won't reveal why Panky is considered the person of interest. So I'll definitely continue to follow this case up. Theories on this case, and they're all alleged because they're not putting out anything. So these are my opinions. Theory 1, the police believes that Janelle was murdered by someone who knew her and her family. Janelle's family was heavily involved in the church, so they were well known in the vicinity of their neighborhood. Panky lived close to Janelle's neighborhood. Apparently, he was a member of the same church, like I just said, and his family, Janelle and her family attended that same church, although he said that he didn't know them. But no one knows if that's true or not. It hasn't been verified that if that statement is true, so there's a possibility that Panky is lying. Theory 2, there's also the possibility that Janelle may have been abducted from her home, which the garage door is open, so it's assumed that even if Panky did it, that he abducted her from the home. So no one knows if maybe someone else did it. Maybe they used a ruse to get her in the house and abduct her. There's a number of things. Maybe it was someone she knew from the church or from the neighborhood, and they used the ruse to lure her out the house and maybe tell her, I remember because she was abducted in the 80s, and so you had people with the stranger danger. That was a big stranger danger time, and where people were riding around in white vans and luring kids with puppies, saying that, oh, here, would you like to help my puppy, or I have a daughter that I'm looking for, and then they would, the child would come near and they throw them in the van and go on about their business. So could that be an issue? Could that be the way, could that have been how Janelle disappeared? Who knows? But that's just a theory. But again, like I said, I will definitely keep my eyes open on this case, and my heart goes out to Janelle's family and friends. They've waited a long time for her to finally come home, and I pray that they'll find out who murdered Janelle and have them brought to justice really soon. Thank you so much for watching.